Ukraine has repeatedly vowed it will not negotiate away its territory in an effort to end the war. But French President Emmanuel Macron says talks with Russia are inevitable. He recently came under fire for insisting that Moscow must not be humiliated. Here's what he said Wednesday while visiting NATO troops in Romania.
Because at some point, when we have helped as much as possible to resist, and I hope that Ukraine will have won, and above all for the fighting to have stopped, we will have to negotiate. The Ukrainian president and his officials will have to negotiate with Russia, and we, Europeans, will be at the table, bringing guarantees of security, the elements which concern our continent. And that is the reality of things.
Well, I want to start with our correspondent Ben Wedeman joining us from Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine. Good to have you with us, Ben. So CNN has been speaking with an intelligence source who provides some context as to why this war is at a pivotal moment right now that could potentially determine its long-term outcome. What more can you tell us, Ben?
Yes, Linda, this pivotal moment is actually not happening in Ukraine. It's happening in Brussels, where the 50-country member Ukraine contact group is meeting before a NATO meeting. And it's all about mustering Western assistance to Ukraine at this critical moment when Ukrainian forces are losing ground. The Russians are taking full advantage of their superiority in terms of ammunition and artillery to pummel Ukrainian forces. They only control a small sliver of the city of Severodonetsk, and many Ukrainian officials warn they will lose more ground unless, and this is the pivotal moment, the Western allies of Ukraine don't come up with adequate assistance. Until now, yes, there have been artillery systems and other equipment and ammunition that has been provided to Ukraine, but it's simply not enough. If these members of the Ukraine Contact Group and NATO can come up with a serious package providing the urgently needed weapons, ammunition, and other equipment for the Ukrainians, the tide in this war could turn dramatically. And certainly what we're seeing in this part of the country is that the Russians have the upper hand. If that equipment does not arrive, that situation can only get worse. Linda?
Yeah. And according to the U.S., some of this package, some of this aid will arrive in the coming days. Ben Wedeman, our thanks to you. We are going to stay on this story. I want to go to Brussels, where the NATO defense ministers have been meeting. CNN Pentagon correspondent Oren Liberman has been following those discussions there, joining us now. So, Oren, as Ben was just mentioning, we did hear a lot more about what these NATO allies are willing to offer Ukraine in terms of military aid. Take us through what they've committed to sending.
So, Linda, we heard from the United States that they'll commit another $1 billion in military aid to Ukraine, and that comes in two different parts. About a third of that is what's called presidential drawdown. So that will be pulled directly from Defense Department stocks and sent into Ukraine. That process now moves very quickly. It just takes days to make a list, review it, and approve it. What's in that part of the package? 18 more howitzers, more than 36,000 rounds of ammunition, as well as ammunition for the HIMARS system. That's a multiple launch rocket system. It has twice the range or more than that for artillery, and it can hit precise targets. At least that's the idea behind it with the proper training. The first round of training for Ukrainian forces wrapped up today, so that should enter the fight here within the coming weeks. Now, the other two-thirds of that billion-dollar package falls under what's known as the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. That means the U.S. will contract directly with weapons makers to send those weapons into Ukraine. That takes a bit more time, but that will include 2 Harpoon coastal defense systems, as well as thousands of night vision goggles, thousands of radios, and more. So that process is in the works. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says they know how urgent this is, and they're trying to move it as quickly as possible. The U.S. wasn't the only country to make announcements. They also said that Germany would be sending in 3 multiple launch rocket systems, so those advanced systems that we're seeing the U.S. finish the first round of training on. So that means that across a few different types of systems, Ukraine will now have 10 of these. Not nearly what they're asking for, But Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Mark Milley said these systems have the longer range and are more precise and should be able to make a great difference if they're used with proper training and used precisely. That, of course, is now what we're waiting to see as Russians make incremental but significant gains in eastern Ukraine.
All right, Oren Liberman for us in Brussels. Our thanks to you. Well, that, of course, was the view from Ukraine and from European allies. I want to turn now to Russia.